Well, hey there, everybody. Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and it is episode number 238 of Goulet Q&A. First one of 2019. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get used to saying that, but that's where we're at, folks, if you haven't gotten the memo yet. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about my seven deadly fountain pen sins, restoring found fountain pens in your desk drawer and how to deal with that, and then my favorite fountain pens that I've found in a TV show or film, among other things. This is going to be a little shorter Q&A today because we actually weren't planning on shooting one this week. I ended up being out for 3 days this week because my kids were off school. We had to do a bunch of accounting stuff. Rachel needed to be here. I needed to watch the kids. So we tag team it like that sometimes. So it was actually very precious time for me. Of course, Rachel and I, as both working professionals, business owners, parents of kids that are still young enough where we need to watch them. They're not as young as they used to be. They're getting bigger. My daughter just turned 7 over the Christmas break here, and then my son is going to be turning 9 here shortly. And 7 and 9, I'm like, man, they're like full-on, legit, like kids. They're not, children. Now they're like kids. They're really adolescents. So it's just kind of interesting, just the things that we're getting to experience with them now. So it was awesome. I got to have some good time with them, some good family time over Christmas break. Rachel's parents came down. Rather than us traveling, which we normally do, we got to stay home and have the whole Christmas experience at our house, which was very much needed because we've been running around like crazy for the month of December, like no free time at all, on like the verge of burnout for most of the month. But we got to have some recuperative time, good family time. It was really, really needed for us. So that was really cool. So let's see here. What else have we had going on? So yeah, I wasn't planning on shooting Q&A this week because normally I shoot Q&As on Wednesday. But just so happened, had some free time this morning, moved some things around, and sorry, this morning being Thursday morning for you. But yeah, so here I am shooting this on Thursday morning. I'm actually have coffee here instead of my normal water, so that's kind of cool. So that's here I am back in the saddle. So I've actually been out of the office for a week now, which is really weird for me. So I'm getting back into the swing of things, learning what the heck is going on. Our team is busy as crud. So we didn't ask for any Q&A questions in the last week because, again, we weren't planning on shooting one. So I dug into the archives a little bit. I've only got 5 questions this week, so we're going to keep it kind of low-key, short and sweet. The team's been crazy busy. It's been busier than expected. Normally we see a big drop off at the holidays. We ended up having to switch over to a new set of accounting books, which is super exciting, I know, and you really care about that. But for those of you who have been business owners or been involved in having to do that, it's kind of a big deal when you have to change a new set of books. So we haven't always had to do that. I mean, we always close out the books, but like to actually start a new accounting file because ours was getting too big. And it was running slow, so we had to change a new one. Tons of work for Rachel, tons of work for Bonnie and for Christian and everybody else who's involved in our accounting software here on the team. Lots of prep ahead of time and lots of stuff going on, especially coming right off the holidays. So, been dealing with that. Rachel's been helping out a ton. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So we normally expect kind of a drop off, and we had New Year's in there, and then just where Christmas fell and everything, haven't had full weeks here for a little while. So we've been a little bit behind. Team's been working really, really, really hard to try and catch up, and y'all have been really accommodating too. So appreciate that. We're holding things together, but man, we're crazy busy, and it's exciting, but also kind of stressful because everybody was hoping we would get a little bit of a lull coming off of the holidays. But we had some big sales that kind of ended now, so we're going to see how things go. So if things seem a little quieter, we're not launching as many new products and stuff like that. It's because we're trying to give ourselves a little bit of breathing room, a little bit of catch-up time here, actually. So for Q&A this week, I kind of dug into last Q&A's questions. We had maybe one question that we pulled from social this week. We've had lots and lots of closeouts and stuff like that. Definitely check out those on the site. We had about 180 items on closeout. As of when I'm filming this on Thursday, we have about 100 of those products left. Not like total number actual items. I'm talking like number of different products. We had 180 on closeout, which is kind of a lot. And we have about 100 left. So some have sold through. So if you're interested in that stuff, check it out. Let's see here. So and the reason for all these closeouts and stuff is because basically we stocked up on a lot of stuff for the holidays. It's always very difficult for us. We're an inventory-based business. Anybody who's in retailer has to manage inventory. You basically live and die by your inventory, and the holidays are always a crazy time because there could be increased volume. You never really know year to year if that's actually going to happen. Historically, we've got enough history now to be able to predict it somewhat, but this ended up being a stronger than expected holiday season for us, which is good, but also it means, if we start to run out of stuff, that's bad for you, it's bad for us. So we stocked up pretty heavily, which may have contributed to the better sales. But now we have some things, because we can't just blanket stock up on 4,700 different products that we have and then expect to sell them all equally, perfectly. We're going to end up with some things that we way undershot, some things we way overshot. So we have some things that we overshot, some of them intentionally, some of them not. And we're basically going to put stuff on sale and close out. And, there's a lot of manufacturers that are refreshing models and stuff like that. So there's a lot of these things that are just kind of naturally refreshing anyway. So if it seems like, man, y'all just had a bunch of crazy sales and now you're running even more sales, that's why. This is more natural with what you see with seasonality with retail. You think about, especially like a clothing retailer, there's very, very seasonal clothing. You can't sell a sweatshirt in the middle of July in most parts of at least North America and Europe. And I guess if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you would, but there's seasonality there, so it's like they're seeing huge swings. Us a little less so with the pen thing, but there's still a little bit of it. So that's mainly what's prompting a lot of the closeouts that we have right now. So we're just trying to be smart about our inventory because we have a lot of exciting projects in the works for 2019. We're a no debt company, so we fund ourselves through the inventory that we sell. So basically, as you are buying things on closeout, you are freeing up the cash that we have tied up in inventory that maybe we don't necessarily need so that we can invest in future projects. That's pretty much the meat of it for those of you who are interested in the businessy side of things. So some of the stuff that we've got right now, we've got the Jaffa ink deal that we extended on certain pens. So it used to be on all pens that Jaffa, the distributor, carries. So Monteverde, Pineider, Online, Stipula, etc. So we've extended that on select Jaffa pens that we're trying to help move along as a gift with purchase there. We have the Visconti Purple Rembrandt still around. Those have sold very well, and I think we're kind of in the tail end of those. The Diplomat Violet Arrow, that's an exclusive that we had, and we're helping it to move along. A bunch of different Pelican things, the M800 Stone Garden, M600 Vibrant Pink, M400 Tortoise, Brown Tortoise. So yeah, we're still moving a lot of that stuff. A number of inks that we're clearing out that we won't continue carrying. There's kind of just a smattering across different brands, but there's a lot of things that we just kind of looked at year end. Whenever we finish out the holidays, we always look and say, okay, all year, what hasn't sold? Like, really? Okay, so we offer this full line of whatever it is. Clearly, like, there's an 80-20 rule that's in place for pretty much everything. It used to be like, yeah, we'll just blanket carry every single ink. No matter what, we'll carry the full line. And now we're like, really? Do people actually care? If it's been 4 years we've carried this ink and we've only sold 3 bottles ever, is that really worth carrying? Do people even want it? So we're getting a little smarter about that kind of thing. So you'll see some ink that's on the chopping block there. We're going to have some new stuff coming out in the next several weeks, but it's not going to be anything too crazy, because we're still kind of getting caught up. And a lot of our distributors, manufacturers, and stuff like that, a lot of them take time off at the end of December. So things kind of slow down a little bit for January, but then expect that it'll kind of pick up more towards the end of the month and then into February. February is usually a pretty strong month in terms of new products. So we'll see how it goes. And then we're coming up on right now number 100. I think we just shot 97, Drew and Adrian, on Monday. So that was pretty cool. Wednesday. Monday we did the New Year's resolution one. I had to remember that because I shot that over a week ago with Drew. But we saved it for Monday. And so Drew and Adrian did it on Wednesday with talking about fountain pen books. So that was cool, doing a great job, especially while I'm out and being able to help out, and you get to see different people on the screen, which is always nice. So yeah, we're coming up on episode number 100, which is crazy because it hasn't even been a year that we've been doing right now. So that's pretty awesome. So we're gonna, and then this is 2019. This is coming into our 10th year. We hit our 9-year anniversary in November last year, and so now we're actually in the calendar year that is our 10th year. So I'll be thinking about that, and if there's anything cool or special that we should do 10 years seems like a noteworthy event for a small business. So that's pretty cool. So now I'm thinking about that now that I'm like, oh yeah, it is 2019. Like I'm writing 19 at the end of my dates. That's kind of makes it sink in for me a little bit there. And then, you know, and right now on Monday, we talked about New Year's resolutions, and I kind of put it out there. I'm really conflicted about like whether you should put your resolutions out there, because I've read conflicting things about like some people, you know, when they put a resolution out there and make it a statement and put it out there to other people, it then makes them feel more accountable towards actually doing something about it. So there's people in that camp. There's others who they just say something, and having said it makes them feel a sense of, oh, well, I've accomplished it enough for my benefit as much as I feel that I should. So therefore, I don't need to actually go and do it now. So I've read conflicting things about like whether you publicly state your intentions, whether it's a resolution or a goal or whatever. Does that actually help you accomplish it or not? I think it depends on who you are. I am definitely more of the person who, if I publicly state a goal, I feel more accountable to actually do it, because I've kind of put it out there and it's my reputation, and I feel like, yeah, now I've actually committed to it. So I am much more likely to actually accomplish it. So I put it out there that my New Year's resolution was to, you know, really address my desire for a woodworking shop. So it's something that I gave up 10 years ago when we got full-time into this business. So I've piddled around a little bit here and there in my little workbench on the side of my garage. Really nothing more than piddling around, a couple hours at a time at most. But largely I have just not addressed that part of my life, that part of my passion for the last 10 years. For the sake of this business. But now my kids are getting to the age where they're learning stuff, they're able to understand more advanced concepts and do some of these kind of skills. And so I've been thinking about like, you know, that's something I really want to pass on to my kids. I really have a passion. I have a passion that doesn't make sense towards tools and woodworking and stuff like that. It's an impractical passion towards that. But it's something that very much fills me up. So I need to figure out what that looks like in my life. And that's kind of what in 2019, I can't just be like, okay, I'm not just going to put it off forever, and then when I'm 65 say, yes, then I'll have time for woodworking. I need to figure out a way to work this into my life. So that's my goal for 2019, is to figure out what that looks like for me and then work towards it. So I need to make it more of a SMART goal, if you will. But that's what I'm working towards. All right. And I'll talk more about what a SMART goal means at the end of Q&A here. Just a little teaser for if you don't know what that is. But I got 5 questions for you this week, and I'll try to move through them fairly quickly so you can get on with your life. But I'm still very honored that you spend time with me every week. I'm still amazed that after 238 of these things, that you're still enjoying it. So I'm very honored. Thank you. And I'll try to make it worth your while today. All right, so starting out with pen and writing questions. This first one is from an anonymous poster on Facebook. What are your 7 deadly sins of fountain pens? And this anonymous poster gave clarifications for what each of them are. So for those of you who don't know, the 7 deadly sins are greed, wrath, gluttony, sloth, pride, lust, and envy. Now, of course, these are all terrible things that we should not do, but I'm going to make them a little bit more lighthearted, and some of the clarifications that were made here are going to help with that. So let me get to that after I take a sip of coffee. So starting out, greed, clarified as the most expensive and inexpensive item in your collection. Okay, so the most expensive would be the Namiki Yukari Moonlight, which I've had for several years now. Love that pen. It's gorgeous, full of rodden, one of my faves. I guess the least expensive in my collection would probably have to be like a free Noodler's pen that came with my ink. I guess technically I bought it, so it's not really, well, I guess it's free because it comes with the ink. The ink doesn't go up in price just because the pen came with it. But I have the old like preppy versions. I have the newer, Noodler's pen versions. But I have a variety of those different types of pens. So I guess those would be the cheapest. I mean, I have like Pilot Varsities and Platinum Preppies and stuff like that. But the free Noodler's ones would have to be. I mean, I've received other pens for free over the years, which I guess have some value to them. Yeah, anywhere in that range, Jinhao Shark pens and these types of things. But yeah, I have a kind of a wide swath there. Wrath, clarified as items that you love to hate. I had to give this one some thought actually, but I settled on a really good one, which I think a lot of you can relate to. It would have to be pretty much any flex pen. I love to hate them, or I hate to love them. I don't know which way you want to clarify it, but basically there's no flex pen that is hassle-free. While I love what can be done with them, they are never without their frustrations. So that would have to probably take the cake. I mean, take any flex pen that you're talking about, and pretty much you're going to deal with some kind of frustration. Especially I'm a big fan of the Noodler's pens, and the Ahab is my my favorite of the bunch there. But it is not without its nuances, I'll call it. I think is a good word to describe it. And then pretty much anything eyedropper as well also kind of falls into that category of I love what it can do, but it's never hassle-free. So yeah, items you love to hate. I think flex pens would resonate with most of you all as well. Gluttony, clarified as your most delicious product. Or the thing that I cannot stop getting, or never satiated, I guess. For me, that would have to be probably pretty much anything Lamy, TWSBI, and at this point, Retro 51. I don't even think about them now. I've just kind of de facto become a collector, and they're so affordable, they're so collectible, and being that I now have a running collection of each of these things, it's pretty much like if anything new comes out from any of those things, I pretty much have to get it. With retro, it's a caveat of like, it's not all their regular edition stuff. It's pretty much the poppers and the special editions and obviously exclusives that I have. Anything exclusive that we come up with here, I always keep one for historical purposes. But yeah, I pretty much have a standing rule on the team here that it's like, oh, it's a new color of Eco or a new color of 580, whatever. Okay, yep, go ahead. What nib size, Brian? Okay, there you go. And a lot of special inks as well. A lot of special edition inks or anything that's being discontinued, like a special ink that we've had a while that's being discontinued. I usually try to hang on to those. So I have an ink collection beyond what even possibly makes sense at this point, but that would be my gluttony. Sloth is my most neglected, excuse me, my most neglected product. I would say pretty much any pen that needs to be cleaned. So it's actually kind of more in my nature to be a procrastinator. And that really shows in my pen life with pens that need to be cleaned. Though I have gotten better about that in the last year or two. Even still, I fight my own tendencies. I tend to basically wait until my pens are dry and crusty and have to be like deep refurb cleaned before I do them. And then whenever I clean a pen that I haven't waited until it dries out in the pen, it cleans so much easier, and I'm like, man, I should really do this with more of my pens. But then lo and behold, I ink up too many pens, I get too excited. Oftentimes what I do is I end up inking up too many pens and then I forget what ink I've put in certain pens. And so then I don't want to use them because a lot of the writing that I'm doing, I get asked about what ink I'm using. So if I don't know, then I'm not doing a service to myself or to the pen community. So I end up then having to clean out the pen. So I need to either like do a better job of writing down what ink is in which pen. I've tried several different methods, all of which have failed. I haven't hacked myself yet to figure that out. But anyway, that's where I'm at. Pride, the item you're most proud of, I would say, pride. Obviously, all of these take a bend towards something very negative, and nothing is on the extreme of what these things are actually leaning towards. But pride for me, the items I'm most proud of would be any exclusive or co-branded thing that we end up doing. Obviously, I'm putting more of my time and energy and personality and whatever into those types of products, so I'm going to be more prideful towards those things and more biased and whatever you want to call it. Lust would be clarified as the product you really want but just can't get. This could be just a blanket thing towards like the next pen that's coming out or the next ink or whatever it is, the next thing. It's like my kids love the movie The Greatest Showman, and there's a song in there called oh gosh, what is the song called? Never Get Enough or Never Have Enough or something like never. Oh gosh, what the heck is the song? I've heard it 800 times. Oh, this is terrible. I've got one of those memories where I cannot remember words to save my life. But anyway, the whole gist of the song is no matter how much fame I get, I'll never have enough. Never have enough. Maybe that's what it is. Somebody will post in the comments and correct me for my shortcomings here. But anyway, that's kind of how I feel with pens sometimes. It's like, sometimes I feel like I can never have enough. So that's where I would struggle with that. But aside from the whole like, can't get enough kind of thing. The Lust, I think, I clearly struggle with FOMO, but really as far as like brand-wise, Sailor and Mont Blanc, they're kind of my white whales at this point. I don't know if any of them are even going to happen, but let's be real. Those two that I would love to have, that I just don't know that I will. And envy, who in the pen community do we envy the most? Really no one, honestly. This is one thing that I really just don't struggle with because I just do not really compare myself to others. But if I had to kind of put myself in one category on this one, just because I don't want to leave this question unanswered, I really appreciate the skills that nibmeisters have. I love that work, and I try to do that as much as I'm able. And I definitely think like in an alternate life, I could have gone down that path and been a very happy, very successful nibmeister. So I guess I'm really not envious of nibmeisters. They work really hard and they deserve, what they get for the work they do. And I know that that's not the path for me, but I do really appreciate that work, and I could see doing that. I could definitely see living a very happy and fruitful life as a nibmeister in an alternate time frame. So there you go. That's my 7 deadly sins of fountain pens. Of course, obviously, the whole thing with the 7 deadly sins is like all of them stem from something that really isn't bad unless it's taken to the extreme. So I tend to be a very extreme person, honestly. Moderation is not a strength of mine. I tend to pretty much be all in or none at all. But I think that I do try to keep myself at bay towards the deadliness part of all these things. But I still thought it was a fun question. It was an offbeat question that I haven't really answered in this similar fashion before. So it made me think. So I appreciate the question, you anonymous question asker. All right, next one is from Rob B on Facebook. Are the sections of the Kaweco Classic Sport and Skyline Sport pens interchangeable? I might know a guy who's thought about a mint pen with a Bordeaux grip or something similar. You might know a guy, eh, Rob? So asking for a friend? Yes. To make a very simple question, very short, they are interchangeable between these two models. In fact, there's several other models that could be interchangeable as well. But yeah, basically the only difference between a classic sport and an ice sport is the color. The grip sections are completely interchangeable between the two, and you can swap to your heart's content. Oh, sorry, you asked Skyline Sport. Yeah, Skyline, ice sport, classic sport, all the same. Swap away and go nuts. All right, paper question. This is from Lucy Honeychurch on Twitter. I use the Leuchtturm notebooks as a diary and never quite know what to do with the perforated pages. I use them to try out ink, but I never need 8 pages for this. I'm curious what other people do with the perforated pages. Wish you the best for 2019. Well, I wish you the best too, Lucy. Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't talk a lot about paper all that much sometimes. And honestly, let me see if I've got a Leuchtturm right here. So this is a Leuchtturm bullet journal, which I believe still has the perforated pages in the back, if I'm not mistaken. I need to refresh my memory on that one. Do they have the perforated pages? You know what? Maybe they don't, now that I think about it. Huh. Okay, that's cool. I don't know if I have another one handy right here. This is the kind of thing that I should have grabbed ahead of time. All right, well, I am familiar with the regular version of the Leuchtturm, so it's got some perforated pages in the back. Basically, it just means it's got little dots kind of punched out, so you can easily tear it out. So basically, your question is, why would you tear them out if you're using it like a diary? And the short answer is you wouldn't. A lot of different notebook companies, they come up with different formats, different features, and things like that. Some have numbered pages, some don't. Some perforate their pages, some don't. Some have, one line ruling throughout the whole book. Some have like a third graph, a third line, a third blank, and that's their shtick, right? So there's all different types of features or whatever intricacies of given notebooks, and this is just one that Leuchtturm has worked into their notebooks, as they wanted to put some perforated pages in there for the circumstance where somebody might want to tear out pages. And believe it or not, I do get people that ask about that. Some people say like, hey, I love the Rodeo Web notebook or whatever, the paper in it's the best, but there's no perforated pages, so when I need to tear out a page, I gotta like rip the whole thing apart. Yeah, and that kind of stinks. So I think Leuchtturm was just looking to offer that as a feature for the purposes of these situations where somebody might want to tear it out. Specifically what that circumstance is, I don't really know. I've never actually torn a page out of a notebook other than when I've been trying to like demonstrate how a particular paper performs out of a notebook. Then I've maybe torn it out so I could scan it or whatever. But that's really the only circumstance that I've been in where that's happened. I think, certain circumstances, if somebody's using it just as kind of more of a carry-around notebook, just to jot down ideas and write things out, not as like so much of a diary as like, this is a record that I'm going to keep and cherish in one whole form. I think if somebody's using it more as almost a scrapbook of ideas and stuff like that, then they may have a situation, I can imagine like a business scenario. Like I'm a business person. I may want something where I just jot down, meeting notes and stuff like that is important for a period of time. I may want to save it, but it's not going to be something I like pass on to my kids necessarily, because it's just going to be kind of simple day-to-day stuff. There might be a scenario where I'm sitting down with somebody and I need to write down, particular contact information, or I might need to, jot out some kind of raw sketch or idea that I want to give to that person. I could see that being a scenario. That's kind of where I could see it, but that's why they don't include I think it's like 8 pages or something. It's not a lot of perforated pages, but they include some just as an option. You don't have to tear them out, but it's there for you if you do. So really that's it. It's not any more complicated than that. But I am curious to know, for those of you who use bound journals, do you desire perforated pages? Because, this is the kind of thing like, I never really know how much demand there actually is for this kind of thing, because a lot of times that's not one of like the most important features of paper, is whether it has perforated pages or not, except when you're talking like a Rhodia pad, right? Like a notepad, perforated pages are more or less a given. It's not necessarily a given, but it's definitely a very desired feature. Less so in a bound journal. So I'm curious to know, if you want to leave in the comments, how important that is to you. Do you want to see that on more? Do you love that on which notebooks, and what do you use it for? I'm just kind of curious to learn more about that. So that's half of why I took the question. All right, got a troubleshooting question. This is from Curt A on Facebook. People keep finding old abandoned pens in desk drawers. How about a how-to for resurrecting them? Okay, so this is something that we get asked about a lot here at Goulet Pens, especially for new people that are getting into the fountain pen hobby. Especially it's like, okay, I came across this YouTube video. Oh yeah, fountain pens, that's kind of interesting. You know what? My mother had some fountain pens. Let me go see what she's got. Or my grandfather was into fountain pens. Oh yeah, he gave me that pen 20 years ago and I shoved it in a drawer. Let me pull that thing out again. So this kind of scenario happens pretty often. So that's the situation we usually run into, is I was gifted a pen, or I just started getting into fountain pens and I found this at an antique store or a flea market, or it was given to me by someone in my family, but it's old, dried, and crusty, and it doesn't write, and it looks like crap, and what do I do with this thing? Half the time it's like, what pen is this? That's what we're getting reached out to. So it's kind of tough for us on the team because we aren't pen restorers. We don't have a deep knowledge of vintage stuff, which often this is what you're getting into, is I've shoved the pen in a drawer, or this pen was shoved in my mother's drawer for 30 years, and I'm pulling it out for the first time and I'm trying to revive it because it has some meaningful significance in my life, or in her life. But what do you do with this thing? So it's tough because we're not pen restorers here. We're not seeking to be pen restorers. And because frankly, unless you have decades of experience in a particular pen style and you really know about those vintage pens, it's really difficult. So there's a very, very select few people that I have a super general awareness of. Largely they go around to pen shows that might restore vintage pens, and usually they tend to focus on particular styles of pens. You get some who are more kind of generalist and they'll kind of just restore whatever because they do it as a hobby and they tinker. I don't know anybody that's got like a big thriving career business as a pen restorer, because it's really a hobby kind of thing. So you end up kind of having to chase them down. So places like Fountain Pen Network, maybe Reddit, Goulet Nation, maybe. Largely it's places like Fountain Pen Network where people tend to congregate to talk about pen restoration. And then you got to kind of like hunt around, ask around to see who actually does this kind of stuff. And then you can maybe get some answers as to what type of pen you have and stuff like that. But so I can't get really into all the specifics of it because it largely depends on the age of the pen, the condition, the type of filling mechanism, type of pen, and all that. There could be a lot of different steps, especially when you're talking vintage stuff. You could be into restoring the pen sacks and getting parts and stuff like that. So you're really going to need like deeper pro advice if you're talking to actually fully restore a pen. But at least I can help maybe in the initial assessment of the pen. So the best I can give you is kind of a few first steps, and then I'll just like kind of leave you at the doorstep of the next rabbit hole that you can go falling into. Do rabbit holes have doorsteps? I don't think so. But anyway, I'll leave you at the edge of the next rabbit hole with vintage stuff, and you can just go fall down that. I keep my distance from that rabbit hole because you can only fall down one rabbit hole at a time. Let's be real. Okay, so I think if you find one of these pens, the first thing that you can almost always assume is that there's going to be dried up ink inside this pen. Assume that it's not going to function, because often when a pen is kind of cast aside and just left in a drawer, it's because it was an afterthought, and usually people are not thinking, oh yes, let me clean this pen out so that 30 years from now, somebody who happens to get into this won't have to deal with it. No, you're thinking, I don't want to deal with that. And usually it's like, this pen's not working, or it ran out of ink, and finally that's the last straw. Forget it, I'm just going to throw it in a drawer. I feel guilty throwing it away, but I'm going to throw it in a drawer. Guess what? Now there's dried, crusty ink inside that pen. So almost always that pen is not going to write. It's not going to function. The filling mechanism is going to be like basically glued shut through the crusty ink that's left in there. The feed is going to be filled with crustiness, and you're going to have to basically give this thing a deep clean. You can pretty much assume that's the situation you're going to be in. So there's going to be dried ink that's going to be needed cleaned out. It's going to be difficult. And the dried ink is going to often clog the pen entirely, so it's really not going to flow, and it's going to be hard to actually flush the pen like normal to even clean it out. So you can assume that that's pretty much the situation you're going to be in. Let's see here, what else? You can assume that you're going to need pen flush. So just cleaning it with water, okay, it can be done, but this is where pen flush really shines, is when you have dried, crusty ink that's left in it. That's pretty much part of why we developed it. It's not just for stubborn new inks you put in your pen. It's because, well, if you're like me and you wait forever to clean out your pens and they dry out on their own, you know, obviously a pen flush helps a lot with that, but it becomes basically an essential tool when you're dealing with ink that's dried out over decades. Not that it dries out any more over a decade as it would over, say, 6 months probably. But basically you've got really dried crustiness happening. You're going to need the pen flush. Soaking the grip of the pen is going to be most helpful, especially because you're not going to be able to use like a bulb syringe or use probably the filling mechanism that's built into the pen. Depends what it is. If you got a lever filler, piston filler, whatever type of mechanism, if it's built into the pen, you're probably not going to be able to suck water up into the pen or pen flush up into the pen and flush it back out to get that crustiness out of there. You're probably going to have to let it soak so that it can like break down what the gunk that's already in there enough so that you can even then begin flushing stuff through it. So expect that you're going to probably have to soak it for a day or even a few days. I've heard of some people that have done pen stuff where it's taken a week worth of soaking before they can even get stuff to flow through the pen. It all depends on what condition it was left in and how bad it was and all that. If you got somebody that used a pen for 10 years and never cleaned it and it was like all clogged up and gunky anyway, and then they left an ink in there and it was an ink that happens to gunk up a lot anyway, you're going to be left with kind of a mess. So soaking it is going to be really helpful. If you can disassemble the pen at all, that's great, but be careful doing that because the dried ink is going to basically act like glue and you might break it. You might be dealing with older, you know, brittle plastics and rubbers and stuff like that that have kind of dried out, and then you combine that with ink that's acting like glue, and then you pull it, you might break stuff, and once you break it, then you're really kind of up a creek. So it's really it's best, you know, if it's a cartridge converter pen, that's a lot easier because you can just unscrew the grip and drop it into the thing, and that's great. If you got something more complicated like a lever filler or something where you can't really take the pen apart so easily, or it's like, you know, shellacked together and you try to soak the whole thing, water gets in all kinds of places, that gets really tough. But you know, honestly, if the pen's in that bad a shape, soaking it's really not going to hurt it but so much. That's pretty much the first thing a pen restorer is going to have to do, is soak the whole thing and break down all that dried ink that's in there, and then they can kind of assess the condition of the rest of the pen. So pretty much you can do that step yourself. You can just soak it just in regular pen flush. The only caveat would be pretty much any ammonia-based pen flush like what we have is going to react with aluminum. So you don't want to leave aluminum soaking in there. So if you happen to know, most pens, if they're made of aluminum, it's the solid pen body that's aluminum. You're not dealing with like aluminum trim pieces and stuff like that most often. But you're pretty safe to soak it in an ammonia-based flush. That's part of why we developed a flush based off that material, is because it's been kind of used for decades from from people with vintage pens. So that's going to be most helpful. If you have an ultrasonic cleaner, like an ultrasonic like jewelry cleaner, that can be really helpful. Pretty much everybody I know that does a lot of vintage stuff, an ultrasonic cleaner is pretty much par for their course. But of course, it's not super practical. The cheapest one, those tiny little ones that you can get from like Harbor Freight or whatever, they're like $30 or $35. So is that really worth it to do for 1 or 2 pens? Probably not. So you're just gonna have to soak it longer without having an ultrasonic cleaner. If you have an ultrasonic cleaner, you can do more pens at once. You can, get it down to maybe a couple hours instead of several days or a week. It speeds things up a lot because it basically like vibrates and gets the ink to break down a lot faster. So that can help. But yeah, it's not necessarily required. And pretty much you're gonna have to do probably the whole pen. And if this doesn't do it, then you're pretty much into like restoration territory. And if you try soaking, you try doing all these steps that I've talked about here, and it's still not working, still not flowing, there might be something wrong with it, there might be something broken, there might be more professional assessment that's required, and that's really where you need to send it off. Now, this method that I've talked about here is generally pretty safe for most pens. Of course, I'll leave a caveat out there to say, who the heck knows what kind of vintage thing you might run into, and there could be all kinds of scenarios. So if you're into something that is truly precious and you don't want to risk, ruining your grandfather's pen that is irreplaceable and means the world to you, don't just blindly go throwing this into anything or trying to pull it apart or do anything to it. Go to a pen show or try to track somebody down that actually knows it. Post on a forum or something like that to show a picture of it, try and assess what it is and the appropriate steps to be taken. Be as intentional towards restoring it as you care about the outcome of the pen. If it's some random thing that doesn't mean anything to it, you found it in a box of stuff at an estate sale that you bought, because you were trying to get a nice set of knives or something, and there happened to be some pens that came along with it, and you don't give a crap whether those pens work or not, and you just want to mess around, goof around, sure, throw it in some pen flush and see what you can make happen with it. But if it's a truly rare pen that is your grandmother's Mont Blanc that she got as a wedding gift or something, who knows, then you should definitely take more precautions towards that. And that's where I'm like throwing my hands up to be like, I can't really help you there. You're gonna have to maybe look for other resources because I'm not deeply plugged into the pen restoration world. I run into people here and there, but basically when I go to pen shows and stuff like that, I'm not deeply connected with the pen restorer crowd, and a lot of them will go to some pen shows and not others, and so they're a more ambient, they're not like an established business. Like you pretty much know who like the major retailers are, like Goulet pens and Jet pens and Andersons and Farney's and Fountain Pen Hospital and all that. Fountain Pen Hospital could be a good resource because they have been restoring pens for years. I don't know how much of it they're doing these days, but they can be a good resource. So I'll point you there at least. But as far as other companies, I don't know anybody who does it like reliably on a regular basis. I'm sure there are some folks who are very reliable. As individuals and stuff like that, but I just don't know anybody offhand who's like, yep, they've got a website and they take business all the time and they're always around. There's a lot of people who are kind of here and there, they do it on the side, sometimes they take business, sometimes they don't, so you gotta track them down a little bit. All right, but I hope that helps anyway, at least in assessing the initial steps. And to close out Q&A this week, I have a personal question from Tyler H. on Facebook. What is your favorite movie or TV show scene that showed a fountain pen? So truth be told, I haven't actually noticed all that many, even though I've been in the pen thing for 10 years now. I still haven't seen a lot of them in movies and TV shows. Now, granted, I don't watch a whole lot of movies and TV shows. I really don't. So maybe I'm not the best person to ask about that. But there's all kinds of like threads on Fountain Pen Network and Reddit and places like that, Goulet Nation maybe, that like seek out like, hey, what movies have fountain pens in them? I can think of a handful of them, but there is definitely one that sticks out in my mind. And again, this partly is because I just don't watch a lot of media in general, but also because I have had young children for the last 9 years. So most of the things that I've been watching have been Sesame Street, Disney stuff, Pixar, your typical like, I have young children and I largely don't understand pop culture anymore. That's my scenario that I'm in. So most of what I've seen has been kid stuff. And so there's one very prominent, not very prominent, there's one I guess it was an animated short. I don't know if it's technically a film or a show or whatever, but it came out in 1936. It is a Disney production, an old Mickey Mouse short called Through the Mirror. And so some of you who are Mickey fanatics and classic Disney fans, you may know of this short. But basically, Mickey falls asleep reading Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll, and he's in his home decorated with 1936 era items with an old ring telephone and a coat rack and all these various things. And so he falls asleep and kind of goes into this dream state where he goes through his mirror in his abode, and through the other side of the mirror, all of the inanimate objects in his room start to come to life, basically. And he drinks some solution or whatever and ends up shrinking and becoming very small, and then kind of ends up in this world where he's interacting with this inanimate objects while he's like the size of, maybe a Post-it pad or something like that. So he is just kind of in this various scenarios, and he's dancing and he's playing around. But the scene that has the fountain pen in it, things start to get kind of weird. Just like a lot of, kind of classic Disney films, you're like, man, what were they on when they came up with this? Like, who dreamed this up? But anyway, this definitely kind of took a weird turn. And in this particular scene, Mickey is kind of dancing around, goofing around, and there's a Queen of Hearts or whatever, a queen like playing card, and she's a Greta Garbo type figure, and Mickey starts kind of dancing with her and flirting with her a little bit, and the king of what I guess was the King of Hearts, starts noticing that and doesn't take a liking to it, and Mickey kind of goes into a battle scene with the king. The king sicks all of his playing cards at Mickey and basically kind of attack him in like this army fashion. And so Mickey like goes to hide in this inkwell and takes a fountain pen, which is a very obvious fountain pen. The fountain pen is like the size of that big Blommy Lux that I had a couple of Q&As ago. It's like that size. So he takes it, and it's a lever-filling fountain pen, and he basically starts shooting it like a machine gun, like mowing down all of the playing cards with his fountain pen. And I was like, this is cool because it's a fountain pen, but it's also like, what is this teaching our kids? Like, this is a very weird moment when I was watching this where I really enjoyed it, but I was also like, this is bizarre. Like, you just don't see that kind of thing happening in today's politically correct environment necessarily. You might see that in like more of the cartoons that are geared more towards adults, but you definitely don't see that in young children's shows. So I'll watch some of these vintage cartoons and stuff like that, and I even think about like Looney Tunes and stuff like that. I'm like, man, there's some really violent stuff going on here. This is very normalized. But anyway, that gets into a whole other thing. I will not go there, but anyway, that is the scene that happens, and eventually Mickey wakes up and everything's fine. But that was a very notable scene for me, especially because it was like so period of the time with like a lever-filling fountain pen, and it was just very naturally on the desk with an inkwell and all that kind of stuff. So that stuck out in my mind for sure. But a little creepy, a little messed up. But hey, there's a fountain pen in there, very prominent and very memorable, kind of a central, maybe not central to the whole thing, but very much kind of like the climax scene of that whole ordeal. So anyway, that's mine. I'm curious to know what yours are. So maybe if you want to leave something in the comments about notable things that you've seen fountain pens in movies or TV shows or whatever, that'd be kind of cool. Most of the other ones that I've seen have been like, oh yeah, so-and-so happened to be using a fountain pen, and I barely noticed it in 4 seconds in this one particular movie 10 years ago. Like, okay, you'll run across that kind of thing, but this Mickey one was the one that like, okay, the fountain pen is like front and center being featured as a part of the story, I guess. All right, my question of the week for this week, as I close it out, going back to the whole New Year's thing, a lot of people are thinking like, okay, I've had a lot happen on the holidays, that's kind of over now. We're looking towards the new year. So thinking about goals and just kind of what you want to accomplish. So my question for you in the comments is, what are you looking to accomplish in 2019? Anything notable? For me, it's, addressing my woodworking passion. and especially in a physical state of setting up a workshop. What does that look like for me? So that's mine. I would like to know what something that you got that you're kind of, while you're probably in that state of like, I need to figure out what I'm doing with my life in 2019. I'm curious to know what that is for you. And then my writing prompt for you is to write down a SMART version of your goal for 2019. So SMART goals, for those of you that haven't heard, it's an acronym, and the various letters can mean, very specific words, but the intention is largely the same. So the S stands for specific. So for example, if you want to lose weight, wanting to lose weight is not a specific goal. If you say, I want to lose 10 pounds, that is a specific goal. So making your goal specific, making it measurable. If you're saying lose weight, how are you going to actually measure that? Well, I'm going to step on a scale. That one's pretty easy. But if you're like, I want more money. Okay, specifically, and then how are you going to measure that? I want to make $10,000 more next year. That is a specific and measurable goal, because you can look in your bank account and see, did you make that? A stands for a lot of different things. I've seen a lot of different kinds of things. I tend to use it in a work context here at Goulet Pens as assignable, but a lot of times it can mean accountable. But basically it just means that you have some way to really hold yourself accountable, or there's some method of accountability to it. For us here in our company, we say assignable because it needs an owner, whether it's like a project or something. Like there has to be one person. We can't just say, yes, we want to accomplish this goal. We want to carry this new brand. Like, okay, who's gonna go make that happen? Like that is the accountable, assignable part of it. The R stands for, what does the R stand for? See, I didn't write this down ahead of time. I'm going this completely from memory, which my memory is terrible. Realistic, that's what it stands for. So just making sure if you're like, I want to make $1 million next year, but you're like, a college student right now, probably not a super realistic goal. Maybe it could happen, but it's pretty pie in the sky. Most people, they're not in that scenario. But if you're like, okay, if I'm making $57,000 a year right now and I want to be making 62 next year, that is a realistic goal. Going with the money thing, I don't know why I switched from losing weight to money. A lot of those are some of the top goals for people. And then T is timely. So having some sort of deadline assigned to it. So, if you say, let's go back to the weight one, because people get weird about money. And weight is very much on my mind as well. So if you say, I want to lose 10 pounds, that's specific. It's measurable because I can step on a scale. I am solely accountable to it. And I say, hey, Rachel, I'm doing this, so hold me accountable. It's realistic because losing 10 pounds is something I've done before and I know I can accomplish it. And then timely by the end of 2019. Boom. Specific, measurable, accountable, realistic, and timely. So that would be a SMART goal, as opposed to, I want to lose weight. Much more likely to accomplish that if you make it a SMART goal. So there's your little lesson for the day. A lot of people, you probably heard it, but anyway, that's a very, very good thing. So I'm working on that for myself, for my woodworking thing. Yeah, my goal right now is to make my goal a SMART goal. That is specific. I'm going to make my goal a SMART goal by the end of next week, or whatever. I don't know. Don't hold me to that. Though I've said it now, so clearly I'm going to have to hold myself to it. So, because that's the way I work. There you go. That's where I'm at for this week. Glad I was able to sneak in a Q&A this week. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment, all these various things if you enjoyed this at all. I hope you enjoy your first week of 2019, and I hope you have a great weekend and a great rest of your week. Thanks so much for watching, and right on.